This nightmare began on a humid August night in 1851, somewhere in Southside, Virginia. The buyer was Thomas Rutled, owner of Belmont Estate. Within 14 months, this single purchase would lead to 3 deaths: the complete abandonment of the prosperous plantation, and the sealing of certain rooms in perpetuity. Local history holds 17 references to the Rutled incident in private diaries, but all official records were expunged. The few surviving accounts speak of an obsession so consuming it destroyed everything it touched. If you're fascinated by the darkest chapters of American history, the ones they tried to erase, make sure you're subscribed to the Forgotten Liturgy. Now, let's discover what really happened behind the closed doors of Belmont Estate, and why 3 people would die to keep it secret. Southside, Virginia, in 1851, was built on the backs of enslaved labor. Belmont Estate was a sprawling, 3,000-acre property run by Thomas Rutled, 37, a stern but efficient master trying to repay inherited debts. His wife, Catherine, 10 years his junior, was a noted beauty who had provided a substantial dowry. But the loss of a stillborn son had left her fragile and deeply unhappy. They lived parallel, touching lives in the same house, both consumed by a quiet, nameless desperation. It was into this atmosphere that the slave trader Samuel Wickham arrived on August 14, 1851. Wickham specialized in specialty acquisitions for discriminating clients. In Thomas's plantation office, Wickham leaned in and dropped his voice. "I've acquired something unusual, Mr. Rutled. This is a unique specimen purchased 3 weeks ago at the Charleston market." Wickham explained that the slave was educated and could read and write, but that wasn't the main draw. He paused for effect. "This slave is what medical men call a hermaphrodite, born with the physical characteristics of both male and female, a genuine medical curiosity." The slave was young, about 19, trained to accept medical examination without resistance. Wickham's price was $2,470, well above market rate. Thomas felt a sensation like falling, captivated by the concept of a perfect ambiguity. He thought of his wife's emptiness and his own. "I'll need to see the slave first." 20 minutes later, Thomas stood staring at Jordan. The slave stood in the doorway, in a simple cotton shift, eyes downcast. Thomas could immediately see the strange ambiguity that defied easy categorization. The face was beautiful in a way that belonged fully to neither sex, with delicate features and large, dark eyes. The body beneath the shift hinted at curves that might have been feminine, or something else entirely, when ordered to speak. Jordan's voice was pitched somewhere between male and female registers. "My name is Jordan, Master. I am 19 years old. I can read, write, and cipher. I have been trained to submit to medical examination without resistance. I am obedient and willing to serve." The words were rehearsed, flat, but Thomas heard a quiet intelligence beneath them. He felt a rising fascination, a need to comprehend the mystery before him. "I'll take it," he heard himself say. The transaction was completed within the hour. Thomas then led his new, expensive acquisition not to the slave quarters, but to a small, isolated cottage at the edge of the formal gardens, close enough to the main house to be convenient, but private enough to ensure secrecy. "You'll stay here," Thomas instructed Jordan, in the isolated cottage. "I'll send for you when I've decided on your duties." Jordan stood motionless, confirming obedience. "Yes, Master." That evening, Thomas told Catherine about the acquisition, describing Jordan as an unusually educated house slave with unique characteristics valued for medical reasons. Something in his tone, however, made Catherine look up. "What kind of characteristics?" she asked. Thomas suggested she should see for herself. The next morning, Thomas brought Catherine to the cottage. Catherine's initial disinterest slowly transformed into the same disturbed curiosity and fascination Thomas had felt. After Thomas clinically described Jordan's condition, Catherine asked, May I examine for myself to understand? Thomas's heart raced. If you wish. What happened in the cottage over the following hour was the beginning of their descent. Catherine's examination began with clinical detachment, but quickly became something else, a shared, unnameable obsession. That night, for the first time in months, Thomas and Catherine came together in their marriage bed, drawn not by love, but by the shared secret and the impossible person who now lived in their garden. Within a week, Jordan was moved to a small room on the third floor of the main house, officially designated as Catherine's personal maid, existing in privileged isolation. But the other enslaved people noticed the change. The master and mistress disappearing upstairs at odd hours, the unreadable sounds, and Jordan's careful, distant movements. Harriet, the plantation cook, noticed Thomas neglecting the plantation, and Catherine growing thinner and paler, spending hours locked in the third-floor room. When Harriet quietly asked Jordan if they were hurting her, Jordan replied with a flash of resignation, "I do what I was born to do. It's easier when you don't think about it." The other slaves whispered about the new arrival, some even recalling old stories of conjure and bewitchment. Upstairs, the obsession consumed the Thomas acquired books on anatomy, meticulously comparing medical texts to his observations of Jordan, keeping a private, hidden journal filled with notations and sketches. Catherine's fascination was different. She spent entire afternoons in Jordan's room, having the slave dress and undress in garments of feminine and masculine cuts, trying to understand this person who seemed to shift between categories. "I want to understand what you are," Catherine confessed. Jordan's mask briefly slipped. "I see what everyone has always seen, something to be examined, something to be understood, something that exists only to satisfy other people's curiosity." Catherine was unable to deny the truth of this statement. As autumn deepened, the Rutleds' decay was visible. Thomas lost weight, his eyes feverish, his sleep broken. Catherine, increasingly skeletal, neglected her elaborate dresses. Jordan, meanwhile, remained exactly as before, calm, blank, obedient, existing in that strange liminal space. The first crisis occurred in late October, when two field hands attempted to run away. Thomas, roused from his studies, mechanically oversaw their whipping. Harriet, watching, understood. The master was disappearing into his obsession, becoming less substantial with each passing day. That night, Harriet heard raised voices from the third floor, rumen unmistakable. Argument had begun. November brought a crippling cold that mirrored the frigid atmosphere settling over Belmont Estate. The plantation was visibly failing. Fields lay fallow, fences were broken, and Thomas's desk was piled with unopened, overdue bills. He had vanished from county meetings, and Catherine had stopped all social pretense. None of the neighbors guessed the truth. It was too strange for their world. The enslaved people saw the breakdown in the master-slave distance, maintaining their routines only for survival. Their initial fear of Jordan evolved into pity. Delia, a house servant, tried to reach out to Jordan, but the response was delivered with chilling resignation. "Thank you, but I am alone. We all are in the end." By late November, Thomas began to withdraw, even from Jordan, retreating to his study, drinking, and staring at the locked journal he no longer wrote in. Catherine, however, filled the void, spending entire days in Jordan's room, rambling about her lost child, her failure as a woman, and her all-consuming obsession. Jordan listened, offering no comfort, only bearing witness with careful neutrality. One afternoon, Catherine finally asked the question that had been growing in her mind. "Do you hate us, Thomas and me?" Jordan's response was a profound statement of endured existence. "Hate requires a kind of freedom I don't have, mistress. To hate you, I would have to believe I deserved something different, ... So no, I don't hate you. I simply endure you, the same way I've endured everyone before you. I think we're destroying ourselves, Catherine whispered, sobbing, and you're just watching it happen. What else can I do? Jordan replied. The crisis came to a head on December 15th, with the arrival of Dr. Edmund Carile, an old family friend from Richmond. Thomas, in a manic moment of weakness, had invited the renowned physician to validate his obsession and give a professional opinion on his medical curiosity. Carile listened to Thomas's excited, rambling discourse over dinner with growing discomfort. After retiring to Thomas's study, they went to Jordan's room, where Catherine sat like a wraith. Carile, a rotund man of authority, conducted a professional and dignified physical examination. Remarkable, he said quietly, confirming a genuine case of hermaphroditism. But his expression was now complex, mixing professional curiosity with deeply personal concern. He looked from Thomas to Catherine, then requested to speak with Thomas privately. In the study, Carile accepted a brandy, standing by the fire, choosing his words with obvious care. Thomas, I've known your family for many years. I must speak frankly now as a friend and as a physician. Dr. Carile confirmed Jordan's genuine condition, but his main concern was the atmosphere, the way you and your wife look at that person, the tension, the obsession I sense beneath your words. He pointed out the failing plantation and Catherine's skeletal appearance. This isn't healthy, Thomas. Whatever is happening here needs to stop before it destroys you. Thomas became defensive and angry, insisting, Jordan is my property. How I choose to manage my property is my concern. Carile countered. There are moral lines, Thomas, even in the treatment of slaves, and I fear you've crossed several of them. The conversation collapsed. Carile left the next morning, convinced something terrible was unfolding, but unable to report anything illegal. Carlyle's words forced Thomas and Catherine to confront their actions, but instead of changing, they descended into desperation, doubling down on the obsession to escape the guilt. The heavy snows of January 1852 isolated Belmont, accelerating their descent. They abandoned all pretense of restraint. Jordan, too, had changed, speaking with a quiet observation that created cracks in their certainty. You're hurting each other now, not just me, Jordan said one evening. Thomas, looking at the slave with hatred, asked what Jordan wanted. Jordan's response was a revelation. It seems like I'm the only free person in this room. You and the mistress are enslaved to your desires, to your need to possess something you can never truly have. You submit to your obsessions, because you've lost the ability to choose anything else. Thomas's hand dropped, realizing the power dynamic had collapsed. As February arrived, the enslaved people whispered constantly, certain that disaster was imminent. Catherine was wasting away, seeing herself in Jordan, neither fully alive nor fully dead, trapped in some impossible space. No, mistress, Jordan corrected her quietly. I'm just a person. It's you and the master who made me into something else. You turned me into a symbol of your own confusion. I was lost long before I came to Belmont Estate. You chose this. That's the difference. Both Thomas and Catherine were visibly decaying, skeletal and disheveled, wandering the house like ghosts. Harriet, the cook, finally tried to intervene, finding Thomas in his study. Risking severe punishment, she spoke plainly. This thing you and the mistress got going with that slave, Jordan, it ain't right, sir, and it's killing all three of you. You got to let that child go. Sell Jordan away. Thomas stared at her, and for a moment, Harriet saw the truth. He knew she was right, but was powerless to stop it. Get out, Harriet, he finally whispered. The breaking point arrived on February 14, 1852. Catherine had reached a critical stage. Delia, a house servant, noticed a strange, terrifying calm in her eyes that morning, as if she were looking at something far away. The cold rain of the evening intensified, turning the night into a blurring scene of water and wind and night for terrible things. Thomas sat in his study, drinking mechanically, existing in a fog of exhaustion. Upstairs, Catherine sat in Jordan's room, her intensity now desperate. "I can't do this anymore," she choked out. "There's no starting over from this. There's only ending it." Jordan, sitting up, warned her. "Mistress, what do you mean?" Catherine paced, her face momentarily illuminated by lightning, gaunt, haunted, and half-dead. She screamed, "We're not decent people. We're monsters who used another human being to fill the emptiness inside us, and it didn't work. And now I'm hollow all the way through." With sudden purpose, she pulled a gleaming pistol, one of Thomas's father's dueling pistols, from a drawer. Jordan rose, abandoning the formality of slavery for the first time. "Catherine, whatever you're thinking, stop. Talk to someone." "Help me what?" Catherine shrieked. "Forget what we've done to you. We destroyed this person. We're poison." The door burst open. Thomas stood there, alerted by her raised voice. His fog of despair instantly cleared. He moved toward her, his voice careful and gentle, pleading with her to hand over the gun. "There's no making this right, Thomas," she cried. "We destroyed this person. We destroyed everything we touched, ... It's been too late since the day Thomas brought you here." Her shaking stopped. Her face found a strange serenity. "I'm sorry," she whispered, looking directly at Jordan. "For all of it. For everything we did to you. For using you to avoid looking at ourselves." Then, with deliberate movement, she turned the gun and pressed the barrel under her chin. "No." Thomas lunged. Too late. The gunshot was deafening. Catherine's body struck the floor with finality, blood pooling around her head. Thomas dropped to his knees, making raw animal sounds of grief and horror. Downstairs, the servants heard the shot. Harriet's worst fears were confirmed. Catherine lived for 17 more hours. The bullet had not killed her immediately, leaving her in a state beyond consciousness. Thomas sat by her bedside, holding her hand, whispering apologies. Confessions of guilt and love he'd never expressed when she could hear them. He told her he was sorry for bringing Jordan into their lives and starting them down this path of destruction. Jordan remained by the bed, tending to both master and dying mistress with quiet efficiency, offering no comfort or judgment, simply performing the necessary tasks. The doctor arrived and confirmed she was beyond suffering, beyond saving. Thomas sent him away, maintaining his vigil, watching her breaths become slower and shallower, already more absent than present, as the dawn filtered in. Catherine's labored breathing finally ceased. Thomas leaned in, weeping, whispering a final, desperate apology. Her lips moved, conveying silent words he would never know, and then she was gone. Thomas sat with her body for hours, unable to move, swallowed by a vast emptiness. Finally, Jordan spoke. "Master, we need to call for help." In that moment, Thomas lashed out, unable to bear his own guilt. "This is your fault. You destroyed everything." Jordan met his gaze steadily, delivering the devastating simple truth. "No, Master, you did this to yourselves. I was just here." The aftermath was grim. Thomas claimed Catherine's death was an accident, a loaded pistol. The local magistrate, eager to avoid the shame and complications of suicide, accepted the lie with relief. At the funeral, neighbors spoke of tragedy and Thomas's grief, unaware of the truth. But the enslaved community knew. The story of Belmont circulated through the quarters, becoming a cautionary tale about absolute power and the corrupting nature of obsession. They spoke of Jordan as a creature of conjure, or a mirror held up to the Rutleds' broken souls, which they destroyed themselves trying to look into. Within a week, Thomas sold Belmont Estate at a fraction of its value. He performed 3 acts of erasure. He sealed the 3rd-floor room where Catherine died, having the bloodstains scrubbed, though they never disappeared, and the door locked, the key thrown into the well, with a stipulation that the room remain sealed in perpetuity. He systematically destroyed every document related to Jordan bills of sale, medical records, and even Catherine's diary, burning them to ash in his study. He sold most of the enslaved workers, separating families, but he kept Jordan, unable to imagine the slave belonging to anyone else, or perhaps needing the only remaining witness to his degradation. Thomas moved to a small, modest house in Lynchburg with Jordan and 2 elderly servants. He lived like a hermit, completely withdrawn. The terrible intimacy of Belmont was gone, replaced by a vast, unbridgeable distance. They were 2 ghosts haunting the same house. Thomas would often stand outside Jordan's door at night, wanting absolution, but he never knocked. Jordan, sensing his presence, never opened the door. Thomas Rutled died in his sleep on November 3, 1852, 9 months after Catherine. The physician noted in his report that Thomas had simply died of a broken spirit. Jordan was sold at auction for $412, a fraction of the original price, to a farmer who dismissed the growing rumors as gossip. What became of Jordan after that is unknown. The historical record falls silent. Perhaps freedom came through escape or the Civil War. Perhaps not. Jordan vanished into the vast, undocumented darkness of the American slave system. Belmont Estate was haunted. The new owners tried to open and cleanse the sealed room, but the oppressive atmosphere remained. The estate changed hands 4 times in 10 years, each owner selling at a loss, unable to escape the sense that something was fundamentally wrong. In 1865, the main house burned down under mysterious circumstances, leaving only a crumbling foundation, eventually swallowed by the forest. Today, only a few brick foundations remain. Local historians acknowledge the Rutled family, but details of the incident are absent from county records, erased by a systematic effort. The story of Belmont is not just about sodomy or abuse, but about the human capacity for cruelty in the service of filling a personal void, and how quickly a society will conspire to bury the truth when it threatens the moral order. The questions remain. Had any of that truly changed?